What's the creepiest experience you've ever had while driving late at night? Not me but my brother. Driving home from out of town with wife and 3 kids in the back. Going 100 down the highway, both him and his wife see a man on the side of the road. He wasn't trying to hitchhike and wasn't really paying attention to the cars. They only saw him for a second, but he kinda looked like he was stumbling. They're at least 5k from the last town, so they figure he's in trouble. They want to turn around to see if he's okay, but on the highway you can't just do that anywhere. By the time they find a turn off and make it back to the spot, it's at least 15 minutes later. They don't see anything, so they call the local police and explain the situation. My brother and the officer look around a bit, but there's not much you can do. This is the middle of the prairies. There's lots of open land and they are not 100% sure exactly where they saw the guy. The officer says he'll call some more guys and look around a bit more, but for my brother to go home and get his kids to bed. The next morning he got a call from the officer. They found the guy in a diabetic coma and were able to get him to a hospital. He had some beers at the town they passed and just wandered off. My brother definitely saved his life. So the summer after I graduated, I worked at a state park as a temporary worker. My shift was 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. with one of the rangers. One night, we were driving down to one of the boat launches when a man jumps out of the bush right in front of us. He was dressed only in his tighty whities, waving a stick like a sword at the truck. The ranger opened the door and leaned out, asking, "Sir, do you need some help?" To which he screamed, "No," and ran into the woods again. Saw a lot of weird things at that job. When I was 18 years old, my best friend, her sister, and I were driving home late after a night out. It was raining hard and made it extremely difficult to see on the highway. We stopped under an overpass to see if the weather would lighten up a bit. I turned to look out the window, front seat passenger, to find someone in a hoodie charging at the vehicle. Immediately go. We sped off into the night and made it home safely. I have never stopped under an overpass again, and I'm almost 40. It wasn't a spooky kind of creepy, but one time, when I was 20, I was on a drive home, and it was about an 8-hour trip. There ended up being a traffic accident on the way, so I got held up, but couldn't afford to book a hotel for the night. About 4 hours from home, like 11 p.m, I was on a stretch of secluded highway and there was a car behind me, but I didn't think anything of it. The same car followed me for the next hour, but I assumed that they were just going to the same place. I ended up stopping at a gas station to grab an energy drink, and the car stopped across the road but didn't get out. Again, I didn't think anything of it. When I left, the car pulled out and followed me again. I kept driving, and about an hour later pulled over at a rest stop to use the bathroom. The car, still behind me, stopped at the entrance of the rest stop, but didn't get out. At this point, I got super creeped out. I was like 2 hours from the next city, home, so I didn't know what to do. Just to be sure I wasn't going crazy, I pulled over at the next pullout. The car pulled over on a pullout behind it, but on the other side of the road. Again, they didn't get out, but just sat there, so I kept driving, and as soon as I got back into my town, I called my parents to tell them what was going on. They told me to go downtown and make 4 left turns. I did, and again, the car followed me. My parents told me to drive to the police station. The car followed me the entire way to the police station, and as soon as I turned in, they peeled off like 50 km/h over the speed limit. I went in and told the cops what happened, and they sent a patrol officer to find the guy, but I never heard anything about it. I have no clue what the person's motives were, but it terrified me. Now I'm super cautious anytime a car is behind me at night and takes the same turn I do. Driving back from visiting my boyfriend at his college. The drive took about 3 hours by expressway in rural area. It was late and very dark out. All of a sudden the wheel starts shaking really bad, and I have to pull over. Luckily there was a rest stop exit right there, and I was able to pull off the expressway. My friend was with me, and she is pretty drunk, and no help. I get out to see what happened, and see my tire is very low. Please note this was years ago. Cell phones were a thing, but good service wasn't. I opened the trunk to get out the jack and spare tire. 2 guys come over to help. Mind you, it is the middle of the night at a rural rest stop, so I'm a little cautious, but can use the help. I can and have changed a tire, but it's not easy and takes me longer than I care to admit. So I'll let the guys help, but it quickly became apparent they have no idea what they are doing. As I'm trying to get rid of these two, my best friend gets out of the car and starts trying to chat them up. It takes her a couple tries, but I get her back in the car all while trying to get these guys to leave. I'm starting to get really uncomfortable and nervous when out of the corner of my eye I see a car pull out from a dark corner of the parking lot. Two other guys pull up, and before they even got out of the car, the first two hurried to their car and left. The new guys quickly changed my tire. None of us said a word. While they changed it, I said thank you, and both gave me a nod, and just left. No clue who those fellows were, how long they sat in the shadows watching, but after 20 plus years I think of them often, and wish them well. My husband and I were on an emergency trip out to help get my mom into a nursing home. I don't have a license to drive a car, so he had to drive the whole way. About 3 AM, we get to this stretch of road that is, as far as I could tell, a straight road with inlaid fields on both sides. All well and good, but in the pitch black, with no street lights, at 3 AM it was super unnerving. I noticed my husband not acting quite right, like, he was breathing differently, and his posture was a little different. Little stuff, but you notice, when you're married. I was like, honey, do you need to take a break? And he goes, oh, no, I'm fine. Let's just finish this strip and we can find a hotel. I trusted his judgment, and we made it across, and hit the Hairtadays in somewhere. The next morning, we wake up, and are brushing our teeth, and I comment on how creepy that stretch of road was. He gets quiet, and goes, I honestly thought I'd rent that. I remember it not feeling real and me feeling like it was a dream. I told him I'd asked him if he needed a break, and he was like, yeah, I remember that too. And I thought I dreamt it. Do me a favor, and I'll return it if the need arises. If I ever tell you I'm fine, and don't need a break, after driving for 4 hours in pitch darkness again, don't take no for an answer. I was so out of it, I didn't realize I was that gone. So we now have a standing agreement to stop each other well before then. But the idea that he was fully dissociated in that moment and had less than a healthy grasp on reality always makes me shiver. I hate to imagine all the moments that could have gone wrong. Remember, exhausted driving is just as bad as drunk driving. About 20 years ago I was driving home late at night with my husband and son asleep in the car. A light snow was falling, and we were on a back road. As I turned a corner, what looked like a little girl lunged out of the trees with her arm raised. My first thought was she was going to throw a snowball at us, but as I passed her we made eye contact. Her face was twisted into like this angry scream. Ugly and not playful at all. It happened so fast, and I was past her quickly, but when I looked in the rearview mirror, I didn't see her back there at all. I was pretty shaken up, had a scared and sick feeling. Never mentioned it to my husband. We were visiting Big Sur and my kid got really sick, so at about 11 o'clock at night I jumped on the Pacific Coast Highway and headed to Carmel to pick up some medicine. There was very little traffic, and it was very, very dark. Basically cliffs to the left of me going down to the ocean, and cliffs to the right going up to forests. It's a pretty curvy road at times, so all I could really do was focus on the road ahead and worry about my then 1-year-old child. About a half hour into the drive, a bright light suddenly showed up on my left. It started small, got bright really fast, and then just disappeared. At first I thought maybe it was a low-flying jet. The road was really curvy at this point, so I couldn't get a good look. I remember trees on both sides of the road, although they were obviously thinner on the left side. But then, a couple of seconds later, another one came. There was an intense beam of light for a brief moment, and again, it disappeared. The road went around a corner, and whatever it was, didn't follow me. I was still pretty shaken. When I got to Carmel, I couldn't find a drugstore, but did stumble across a grocery store that was open late, so I went in hoping to find Pedialyte. As I walked in, I noticed a map of the area on the wall. One of those touristy things that show local attractions. Just a bit south of Carmel it showed a lighthouse west of the PCH. Needless to say, I was glad no one was in the car with me for the initial scare. It's been 15 years since this happened, and I still feel like quite the idiot to this day. was dating this woman who was afraid to drive, or for some reason refused to, at least on the highway. I never knew why. I worked the late shift at the time. One day, I got home at some crazy hour somewhere between 3 AM and 5 AM. I had taken the following day off because her favorite band was playing in a city 2 hours drive away. She woke me up at 7 AM to wait in line. She had to be first, front and center. Guess who drove? I told her I was planning on getting some rest in the car while she held out spot in line. We got there, no line. Employees weren't even there yet. She's mad at me for trying to get rest in the car. I go sit with her on the curb. Hours go by, no one else in line. First employee walks by and offers us hot chocolate because it's February in the Midwest. People start lining up behind us in the late afternoon. I'm pissed. I could have slept before this ordeal. We attend the show. It was fun. Drive home and I ask her to drive. She refused. I drive us home. It was the scariest drive I've ever had. I was so tired and physically exhausted that I was hallucinating. I didn't know I was at first. The clouds on the horizon was the traffic. In my eyes, it clicked with me when I was focused on one particular cloud and thought, that's a big truck. Why can't I pass it? After I realized my condition, I again tried to suggest she take over. Refused. I tried to take control over my mental state and focus. Got us home okay. Drove very cautiously and kept reminding myself of what I was seeing and what my brain was trying to make me think I was seeing. Got home. Passed out immediately, but had to work the following day and for the rest of the week. So I wasn't able to catch up on that lack of sleep for a while, and that week was so draining. I resent her for putting me in that situation and it scares me to death, afraid of having to go through that again. This was about 12 years ago, and we broke up a while after that experience. I live in the middle of nowhere, and I used to pick up hitchhikers constantly. On Christmas night I drove over the mountain back to my girlfriend's house. After we spent the day with my family, she lived even further in the middle of nowhere. I'm talking an hour away from the nearest grocery store. I'm taking the only road off this area out of there. It's about 20 miles of nothing but woods a couple of miles deep on each side of this road. It's just a very rural area we all lived in. I'm 18 years old speeding along this long straight road about 80 miles per hour. Very dumb, but I was a reckless kid, just trying to get home before 2 AM. I suddenly fly past this guy in the dark just walking down the road miles away from everything. It was freezing out, and I wanted to end Christmas doing something good and not let someone freeze to death on our mountain. I throw on the brakes and back up. I ask the guy if he needed a ride. He was carrying a compound bow. I was thinking a bow at 1:30 AM. And then I find out that he's a poacher, but I can't back out now. I tell him to put it in the back of the truck and hope in. He sets his bow in the back and tells me he's parked up ahead a couple of miles. The guy gets in and goes dead quiet. I mean, he doesn't speak a word. As I said, I picked up strangers a lot back then, but never had one of them just sit in silence. I ask him if he hung out with his family for Christmas today, and he just mumbles no and immediately goes back into silence. At that point, I just wanted this guy out of my truck. I continue driving in silence for a couple of minutes until he tells me to pull over at the turnoff up ahead. I pull off to the side instead of pulling completely in. It's a dead end. Just to be safe, he just kinda sits there silently for a couple of long and comfortable seconds and then gets out. It really felt like he was thinking hard about what to do next. He finally gets out, leaving the door open. I say something on the lines of "Don't forget your bow," then I reached across to shut the door as he turns around to grab it. He slowly grabs his bow out of the back and then turns back and just stares at me through the window without moving. I just kinda sat there looking at him and decided to drive off. Not very eventful, but you had to be there. Something was up with this guy. He was giving off extremely weirdo vibes. At the pull-off I dropped him off at, there was just a minivan parked with the door open. That struck me as odd too. I haven't picked up a hitchhiker since.